Hello and welcome. Today we're diving deep into the moral mind. We're going to tackle one of life's biggest, most frustrating puzzles. Why do really good, smart people disagree so passionately about what's right and wrong? Let's jump right in. Think about it. The entire field of moral psychology is basically driven by this one single mystery. How can intelligent, well-meaning people look at the very same issue and come to polar opposite conclusions about what's morally acceptable? This is the question at the heart of our most heated debates. To get to the bottom of this, scientists really focus on two big questions. First, just looking out at the world. What acts do we even label as moral or immoral in the first place? And second, looking inside our heads. How does our mind actually make that decision? We're going to trace how the answers to these questions have evolved, taking a journey through the past, present, and future of moral psychology. Okay, so let's rewind the clock to the 1970s. This is when a psychologist named Elliot Turiel came along with a really powerful and actually very elegant idea about how our moral minds work. Turiel's core idea was refreshingly simple. He basically said that morality boils down to one universal thing: harm. He argued that every single person, no matter their culture, figures out right from wrong using logic. And it's all based on one question: does an action cause harm? If the answer's yes, it's a moral issue. If it's no, it's something else entirely. Now, Turiel backed this up with a really clever distinction. He noticed that even little kids seem to get the difference between two kinds of rules. Hitting another kid, that's a moral wrong. It's just wrong on its own because it hurts someone, no matter what a teacher or parent says. But leaving your toys on the floor, that's a conventional wrong. It's only wrong because there's a rule against it. For Turiel, this was the smoking gun that proved harm was the one true foundation of morality. And look, Turiel gave us a huge piece of the puzzle. Harm is absolutely central to how we think about morality. But as more research came in, some cracks started to show in his model. It had a really hard time explaining the massive moral differences you see across cultures. And maybe, just maybe, it gave us too much credit for being purely rational beings. And this leads us to a major plot twist in our story. If morality is just a simple, universal calculation about harm, then why on earth do we have these intense culture wars? Why do different groups have such fundamentally clashing beliefs about what's immoral? This very question blew the doors open for a completely new way of thinking. So now we land in the present with psychologist Jonathan Haidt, who basically flipped the whole script. Instead of starting with how the mind should work, he started by looking at the incredible diversity of moral beliefs that actually exist out there in the world. Haidt came up with this radical new metaphor. He said, whoa, hold on. Morality isn't a calculator. It's more like a tongue with a bunch of different taste buds. Our moral judgments, he argued, aren't slow, logical conclusions. They're fast, intuitive, gut feelings. And different cultures, he said, develop their own unique moral cuisines that appeal to different moral tastes. And those tastes go way beyond just harm. He came up with these 5 core foundations or moral tastes, things like loyalty, respect for authority, and a sense of purity or sanctity. Now, the idea is we all have these foundations, but different groups and cultures rely on them differently. For instance, liberals tend to focus heavily on harm and fairness, but conservatives tend to use all 5 more or less equally. And that helps explain why for some people, issues of patriotism or respect can feel deeply moral, even when there isn't a clear individual victim being harmed. This is all captured perfectly in his most famous analogy, the emotional dog and its rational tail. Our intuition, he says, is the dog. It just takes off running in a direction almost instantly. Our conscious reasoning, that's just the tail, wagging along behind to come up with a justification for where the dog is already going. We feel something is wrong first, and then our brain scrambles to explain why. It's the complete opposite of Turiel's model. Now, Haidt's work was a total game changer. It forced the field to get serious about culture, intuition, and emotion. But, and in science there's always a but, right? His theory has its own problems. There isn't much hard neurobiological evidence for 5 distinct modules in the brain, and because it's so flexible, it's actually really hard to scientifically test. So, where do we go from here? And this, my friends, is where it gets really exciting. So we have 2 powerful but clashing theories: Turiel's universal harm versus Haidt's diverse intuitions. Well, it turns out the future of moral psychology isn't about choosing a side. It's about synthesizing the very best parts of both. This synthesis has a name, the Theory of Dyadic Morality, or TDM, and it's brilliant. It basically says, you know what? Turiel was right. Morality is all about harm. But Haidt was also right. It's intuitive and shaped by our culture. The big insight is that morality isn't about objective harm. It's about the perception of harm. Okay, so here is the absolute core of TDM. The theory suggests our brains are all wired with a dead simple, intuitive template for spotting wrongdoing. We're constantly automatically scanning our social world for a three-part pattern: an intentional agent doing something harmful to a suffering victim. When our brain flags that pattern, the immorality alarm goes off. And this, right here, is the breakthrough. The template itself is universal, but our culture, our politics, our worldview, that's what teaches us what to plug into the agent, harm, and victim slots. A person stealing a wallet, easy, that fits the template perfectly. But burning a flag, for some people, the agent is the protester, and the victim is the nation itself. In the abortion debate, one side clearly perceives the fetus as the suffering victim. It's the exact same moral template running in everyone's head, but with different inputs, leading to these profound disagreements. So this table really brings our whole journey together. You see, Turiel in the past was focused on the how, reasoning about harm. Haidt in the present was focused on the what, this whole world of different values. TDM, the future, synthesizes them. The how is our brain's intuitive harm template, and the what is literally anything our culture teaches us to perceive as harm. It's universality without uniformity. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour through some pretty heavy psychological theory. But what's the actual payoff? Why does any of this matter to you? Well, it matters because this new understanding is an incredibly powerful tool for making sense of our polarized world. Our default setting in a disagreement is to think the other person is either crazy, stupid, or just plain evil. But TDM gives us a completely different and frankly more useful lens. It suggests that more often than not, you and your opponent are using the exact same moral hardware. You're both reacting to perception of harm, you just fundamentally disagree on who the victim is and what kind of harm is being done. And you can start using this like tomorrow. Think about a conflict at work over some new policy. Instead of endlessly debating who's right, try shifting the conversation. Ask, what harm are you worried this will cause? Or what harm do you think will happen if we don't do this? This changes the game from a fight to win into an actual exploration of competing perceptions of harm. And that brings us to our final thought, a really powerful question to carry with you. This framework doesn't mean you have to agree with people you disagree with, but it does challenge you to ask a different kind of question. In your next disagreement, before you launch into your argument, just pause for a second and genuinely ask yourself, from their point of view, whose harm am I not seeing? The answer to that question might just change everything.